Hey guys, I'm Simret, and today I will be teaching you all about the rail fence cipher. To solve this cipher, you will be given a key to make a table. You will then use that table to decode the message. Now I'm going to work through a few problems to explain how to solve these types of puzzles. Let's start by talking about the words plain text and ciphertext. Plain text is any word that you can read, like dog. Ciphertext is a word that has been encoded. A word in ciphertext often does not look like a word that you would normally see. Now let's do a problem together. The first thing we do is look at our key. The key tells us how many rows there are going to be in our table. Next, we look at our ciphertext. There are 5 letters in our ciphertext, so there will be 5 columns in our table. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw the table we will use. Now that we have a table with 2 rows and 5 columns, we have to input the letters from ciphertext into the table. An easy way to remember where to put the letters is to draw lines in every box that you have to put letters in. You do this in a diagonal pattern. Now we start inputting the letters. You start with the first letter and put it in the first box in the first row. You then stay in the same row and put the next letter in the box. Now we put in the next letter in the same row in the last box. Since it's the last box, you go to the next row. Now the next letter is E, so you input E. Now there's still one more box left in this row, so you put L. Now that we've finished putting in all the letters, we have to read this and decrypt it. To decrypt, you go from the top left box to the box diagonally under it. So the first 2 letters in the decrypted message are H and E. The next letter is L because you go up in a diagonal pattern, and you continue this until you finish decrypting it. So our final word is hello. Now let's do another example together. To start off, we look at the key. The key tells us that there will be 3 rows in our table. Then we look at our ciphertext and we see that there will be 7 columns in our table because there are 7 letters. Now I will draw the table. Now that we have a table with 3 rows and 7 columns, we have to start inputting our letters. But first remember to always put lines where you have to put letters. So you go in a diagonal motion and put in all of your lines. Now we have to start inputting letters. Remember to always go in the same row. So you start with C in the first row, then you put the next letter in the same row. Now that we have run out of spaces in the first row, we go to the second row and you put in an O and a P and then the C. Now we're done with the second row. Then we go to the last row and we put in an M and an I. Now that we have put in all the letters, we have to remember to go in a diagonal motion when reading the letters. So we go from C to O, O to M, M to P, P to S, S to C, and C down to I. So when you write this out, you get C, O, M, P, S, C, I. ComSci. Let's do another example together. This one's a little bit harder because the ciphertext has spaces in it. Now we look at the key. So the key tells us that there will be 4 rows in our table. Now we look at our ciphertext. Don't forget to count the spaces. So the ciphertext tells us that there will be 10 columns in our table. Now I will draw the table. Now that we have a table with 4 rows and 10 columns, we have to start putting in our ciphertext letters into the table. Remember to always put spaces where you have to put letters. This goes in a diagonal pattern. Now we start putting in the letters. We always start with the first box in the first row. So we put an L. Now the next box in the first row is empty because the next letter is a space. Then since that row is full, we go to the next row. And the next letter is O, and we continue in this row because there are more spaces. The next letter is A, and then D. Now that we have finished with this row, we go to the next row. The next letter is O, And after this O, there is a space, so we leave that blank. We go to the next box in this row, and we put in an O. Now that since we are done with that row, we go to our last row and put in the last two letters. Now that we have put in our letters, we have to solve it and write it out in plain text. Remember to go in a diagonal pattern as you read it. And when you finish, do not forget to put the spaces in. So when you write it out, your letters, your final cipher is look a dog. I want you guys to try this problem on your own. I'll wait for a few seconds, or you can stop the video while you are finishing the problem. Now that you have had some time to solve the problem, let's start. So the key tells us that there will be 3 rows in our table, and the cipher text tells us that there will be 12 columns. Make sure you do not forget about the spaces. Now that we have a table with 3 rows and 12 columns, it's time to start putting in our letters. Remember to always draw spaces in a diagonal pattern where your letters have to go. Okay, it's time to start putting in the letters. Always start with the first box in the first row. So our first letter is C, then continue in the same row and put in all the letters. Now that we have reached the end of the row, start with the next row. So O, then P, then C. Now that there's a space, leave that box empty, but don't forget about it. And then put your next letter, I, and then S. Now that we've finished with the row, time to start putting in the letters into the last row. So M, I, and then D. Now that we have finished, we have to decode the message completely. Remember to go in a diagonal pattern when you are writing out your full decoded message. So when you write it out, you get comp, sci, kits. Thanks for watching this video, and hopefully you learned something about the rail fence cipher.